The first feature I ever wrote for Guitar Player magazine was on Raoul Björkenheim and another Finnish guitar player, Jimmy Suman. When I pitched it to them, they said, "Why should we do an article on these two guitar players? No one knows who they are." And my response was, "This is why I read Guitar Player, to find out about guitar players I don't know about. I don't read it to find out about Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan, who I've known about forever." And to their credit, they let me do it. So it was the first time I actually got to talk to Raoul. We met up again later in New York when we both lived there before he moved to Finland and I moved to Nashville. So it was great to catch up with him again. He's got a new record out, a tribute to John Coltrane. And we talk about that, and we talk about his guitar sound and how he manages to always sound like himself no matter what guitar he's playing, pretty much like the rest of us. So sit back and check out my interview with Raoul Bjorkenheim. Knows what happens. So great. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. So now we're friends on FaceTime. Oh, Facebook. Whoa.
Whoa. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. The last time I saw you was in New York. I remember I went to your apartment once and we hung out. And then I think the last time I saw you was you were playing national steel guitar in Union Square at the,
You saw me doing that?
yeah, at the
You don't
market.
happen to have a, you don't happen to have a photograph of that,
No,
do
I
you?
don't. I
You
don't.
know, it's the thing. I did that for 3 years, and I spent lots and lots of time. I made lots and lots of money, much more than I made in any clubs, and I never got a photograph. So I don't have a single sort of document about me having done that, which is a little shame because I mean, I did it with I studied that music a lot, and I wanted to it would have been nice to have a lot of photographers took pictures of me, but then they walked away, and I never saw them again. So,
Yeah, I mean, well, what year was that?
well, that must have been that's like 2006.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
2006.
before everybody was documenting everything, and before they might have been taking it on cameras rather than cell phones. And when people take it on cell phones, they can send it right to you right there, and it's a different world. I mean, I look back on my
Yeah.
history, and there's so little of it documented, just because the age I am. I just so much of my life was lived before cell phones and the internet, where everything was documented. So
Uh, Tell me about it. That's
that's
exactly how it is.
that's
Yeah,
just the
right.
nature of it. So I don't know if we ever talked about when did you move back to Finland and why?
Well, it was just that the advantages of living in Finland. First of all, it's a sane country. We have a sane government. That's an important thing. Of course, when I left, it was still Obama. In fact, no, actually, when I left, Obama was going to be elected. And in fact, I remember that we celebrated with all my American friends when we heard that he had won. We thought that, oh my God, now America is saved, and now America has left its terrible legacy of racism, and now it's going to get better. That's what we thought.
Yeah.
Um, Little did we know. But I moved back because I had better work offers here. Here I've done since I've moved back. I've done 4 film scores. I've done what 5 records, or no 7 records. Sorry, and then I've been teaching at a university level. So I have really highly motivated students that are really talented. I teach at the Sibelius Academy, so I can make more of a living here. See, that's the difference.
Sure.
And in New York, I was just struggling along, and it sort of somehow erased my self-confidence and maybe my self-esteem also. I mean, I thought it was okay to play in the streets, but after all, I was like above 50. And I was thinking, well, I've been working all my life I never needed to be, super famous or anything like that. I just wanted to be famous enough so I'd have gigs, on a regular basis. And I mean, there were some gigs when I was living in New York, but I mean, as you know, New York, you play a little place and you get $50, and the taxi is like 60. So
Exactly.
you're paying $10 for the gig, so but it looks good on the CV.
Right. Well, do you ever go back to play with anyone in New York since?
Well, I haven't gone back, of course, now with the coronavirus. I haven't been back. My son lives there, you see, and
Okay.
um, and my mother lived there up until 2 years ago. So I decided to relocate her to Finland because she's quite old, and I want to be able to sort of see her now and be with her. So I brought her over here in 2000. Let me see, what was that? 2018. And then after that, I really haven't been able to leave to go back to New York. So I've sort of, I mean, I have all my friends in New York and I correspond with them still, but I mean, I haven't seen them for a while. But I
Right.
mean, I miss New York, of course, like anybody who's lived there misses it. But I have to say that because I was there for 2001, I was there on September 11th, so I had
Right.
moved a month before to New York,
Wow.
month
Yeah.
before, and then everything was going really, really, really well. I was playing with Bill Laswell's wife with Gigi,
Right.
the Ethiopian Madonna, and we had tours of Europe and tours of America. Everything was set up, and we did 2 gigs, and then it was September 11th, and then everything just folded like that. So so it was like I moved from with my family to New York with a big sense of optimism and thinking that wow, this is going to be great, you know total renewal and everything, like not get away from the stigma of only being a free jazz guitar player and being able to play Afro rhythms. And for a while I was the only white guy in the band. It was really great to be playing all the the funky Afro stuff and the Ethiopian rhythms and everything. So I was really happy with that. But then everything was sort of canceled because United Airlines was going to be the sponsor, and then they, after 9/11, they said, "Sorry, we can't do that anymore." So,
Wow.
but I mean, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, we stayed there to live in New York, and I had a great time when I was living in New York. Met all these people. I managed to still play at Tonic, which is one of the main places for the type of music I guess I do at the time, and then I played at the Stone a few times, the old Stone.
Right. Sure.
So I think I did the things that I wanted to do in New York, and it did renew me quite a lot. But then in 2008, it just was too much. It was like, no, I can't do this. This is not working. I just don't. I feel like I'm a drag. I'm always struggling with everything. I was even working in a record store labeling, for Amazon, like used CDs at minimum wage, and that's okay. But I think that you can do that when you're like 18 and 20. But then when you're like a little above 50, it sort of you know there has to be quite a good motivation to live in New York at that point.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem that it was quite enough for me, because I mean there are great players in Finland too, you see. So it's not a question of that like it used to be maybe 30 years ago. Yeah, you met some people in New York that if you played with them, that was the top. But I mean now in Europe we have quite good players. We have great drummers, great bass players too. So I can do the music that I want to do here, and still I miss, of course, I miss my American friends that I played with William Parker and Hamid Drake. We had a trio that was really
Right.
nice. And then yeah, with Lucas Ligeti.
Sure.
Have you ever heard that record?
Yeah.
Shadow
Oh
Boy.
yeah. I have that record. That's a great
Okay.
record.
Well, I think I like that record, and it's really actually I love that record because I think it sort of that to me is my ode to New York, of living in New York, because that's some of the stuff that I learned when I was there. I hadn't been doing that type of music. I suppose here in the north, in the Nordic countries, we have sort of a romantic view of free jazz, and it's a little bit more melodic and a little bit nicer, like that. Of course, the New York scene, it has to be a little bit aggressive. It has to be like that. And then, I mean, I was doing some pretty aggressive stuff with Krakatau too, but I mean, still. Anyway, so that's a real long answer to why I moved back to Finland. But
Yeah.
does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
Yeah, it does, and I was curious. I'm also curious. You spent 3 years playing the national and learning, delving deep into that kind of music. What have you brought from playing that kind of music into your own music and your current music?
Let me think about that. That's a good question. You know what I think the most important thing I learned was the meaning of the word intent. Because when you're singing a blues song, you have to sing it with full intent. I mean, for me, when I have my students and I'm talking about this subject, I put on the Bob Dylan doing "It's All Right, Mom, Only Bleeding" from when he's doing it in London in 1963, alone, and Royal Albert Hall. That to me, that illustrates what intent means, when the way he's delivering that thing is just so intense, and it means that he's totally behind the music. There's no doubt about it that this is his song. That's the intention behind it.
And intention is an interesting subject, because what would be the opposite of intention? In other words, I mean, you would think anybody who plays anything intends to play it. So what would be the opposite, or what does it mean to you, intention?
Well, I think, I mean, for me, I've been asked this question that since I'm more, I mean, obviously I haven't been aiming at a commercial area because I haven't been a great commercial success, but I've been more aiming at what sort of following my own muse and thinking that, well, I mean, these are the type of things that maybe I haven't heard so much on guitar, which I want to make audible. So I play them and I try different things and do them. So I think that it would be really hard for me to think that there wouldn't be something that would be the level of intention in what I do, because I try to do that the best I can. And it's like, I think if you're doing the music that you really like, then you can find that level of intention. And then it's sort of more like I guess, yeah, communicative. It's not so much that just what can I prove to myself, but how I can give something to somebody. So I can present this music in a way that somebody can understand it, and then that's my intent. My intent is sort of like a bridge. It's sort of like a handshake through a computer screen to say hello, here I am. Like if you're listening to a record or screen, going through Spotify. I mean, that's a terrible thing that there's so much music that I have that's not on my name on Spotify. I mean, when I look it up in Spotify, there are like more than a dozen albums that I'm on, but since I'm not, the leader of the band, on my own page, I only have a few things. And this is probably just laziness, that I should really get down and do it. But somehow, of course, I try not to use Spotify so much, because I think it's a terrible, terrible thing that it's done to us musicians.
It is. Well, yeah, it has its downsides. I mean, I use it like radio. In other words, if I excuse me, if I find something on Spotify I like, I'll buy the record so that I can have it, and so the person gets paid. But getting back to intent for a second, there could be a lot of meanings to that, and it's interesting. You use it in terms of communication, and I think of it somehow also as a question of commitment. That you see people, the great players, just seem so committed to every note they play that there's nothing played just to play it. It's every note seems played. I mean, when I listen to you, I hear that. When I listen to other, Jim Hall, I hear that. When I listen to any great player, I hear that kind of commitment, and that's kind of how I think of intent, as because I hear, because I get sent a lot of records, I hear a lot of people who, especially in jazz, who seem like they don't have that kind of intent or commitment to the notes. And I wonder if you run into this with your students, where, the joke used to be guys playing jazz who are playing, Coltrane lick, Parker lick, diminished scale, Coltrane lick, Parker lick, diminished scale. And it sounded, it sounds like they're just playing what they practiced, or as Angus Young said, there's a place to practice your scales, but it's not in front of me. And
that's a good one. That's a good line.
And I just, that I hear a lot of what sounds like that to me. But then among the great people, I hear that kind of commitment and intent you're talking about.
I would say that I've been reading this book on serial composition by the composer Charles Vuorinen, and he uses this concept of the surface of music, which is just the rhythms and the notes and all that, and maybe the raw material. That's the surface. No, I'm sorry. No, it's the way you use the raw material. That's only the surface of the music. And depending on how deep you get into the music, then it has more of a depth. So the surface can be more multifaceted, maybe, that it has more rainbow colors maybe in it. So that would be a question of depth as compared to shallowness, maybe. And of course, I wouldn't want to use that to any colleagues about playing shallow. But I mean, I do hear that a lot. I hear great technical playing, and then just to me, it sounds a little bit like it's not so deep. So I suppose that's one of the reasons why, if I listen to somebody if I want to get a good example of shredding, I'll listen to late Coltrane and not Eddie Van Halen, rest in peace.
Right.
And how much I've learned from him, that's incredible. So he's an incredible figure in the guitar world, and I certainly learned a lot from him too. But I think from the point, this is here a good example. This is only my point of view, and I'm sure that other people would say, "Fuck you, you idiot." That would say, I'd say that Coltrane has more of that depth, so that the surface becomes much more multifaceted because there's so much depth to what he's doing. It's sort of like a lake in a volcano. It looks just like a flat lake, but it could be, a mile deep.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think many people might agree with that. I mean, yeah, Eddie was something other, I mean, kind of, I would agree with you. I mean, I think his playing, he was a savant. I think he had that music in him and he could play it and he was musical, but I don't think he did much thinking about it. Whereas, Coltrane, thought and studied and really brought other factors to it that I think gave it the depth you're talking about. You mentioned playing African music, and I know you studied African music. And I was looking at the video for your East Meets West project, and I was
Yeah.
wondering if you studied Indian music to do that
Oh
project.
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, when I was living in New York, a friend that I made a friend through Bill Laswell, a tabla player whose name is Bill Buchan, who actually is a totally dedicated, a wonderful. He's a real master of the tabla and other percussion instruments, and he actually goes every year to India to study with his guru, a month at a time, and then he goes to California to study with Zakir Hussain, and so he's really like he's a serious guy. So I used to go. We'd have this routine Friday mornings between 10 and 12. It's sort of interesting that I'd walk from my apartment on 14th Street to his on 2nd Street through the Lower East Side, and then I'd get there at 10 o'clock. If I was late, he'd be a little bit, "You're late. It's 5 past 10. What is this?" And then I'd go there, and then we'd set up, and no bullshit. We'd just get down. Okay, let's play. And then we'd set up the things, and we had listened to some music, and I mean, for me, that Indian music, I became aware of it via John McLaughlin. So like, I mean, years ago, he was playing a gig with Jonas Helibori here in town, and then one of the main music critics who I know, he came to me and said, "Raoul, you want to come and meet John McLaughlin?" And I said, "Hello, yes." you know. So so then I went there, and he very embarrassingly he said, "Oh, this is Raoul Björkenheim, he's the greatest guitar player in Finland." I'm like going, and then hello, and he was very gracious. This was like in the 90s, 90, maybe 92 or something. Yeah, 93 maybe. And um and then I mentioned to him that thanks to him, I had started to really get into Indian music, and then we started talking about our different influences and who we listen to a lot. And then after that, I mean, I've always been interested in it. Like the concert that you're talking about was one of maybe, I guess, a dozen or maybe 2 dozen concerts that I've done during the years here in Helsinki, because it's such a small place that it's possible to arrange that type of a concert. So that's another answer maybe to the question why I moved back to Finland, because there's so many, in a way, it's since there's sort of like culture is accepted as a good thing in Finland, and it's supported. It's supported by people getting grants and being supported. You can get support for making a record, that type of thing. That when I tell my colleagues in America about that, they're going, "Whoa, you can get money to make a record?" Yeah, and I said, "Sure." And I'm like, "Whoa."
Well,
So
yeah. Well, the Scandinavian countries seem to be like that. I mean, the Norwegians get a lot of support, and but it's interesting. I wonder if partly the fact that Finland is smaller makes it easier, also, just to get something. Because I mean, when I moved to Nashville in 2012, and it was interesting to see there's a lot of culture here, and I was able to do things that in New York I never would have been able to do. Like I took up photography and was able to get in photography shows down here, and that wouldn't happen in New York. It's just everything is more, as we like to say, it's more manageable, and I'm sure that's the case in Finland as well. Because I don't
oh
know if
yeah, sure.
I don't know if you remember the first article I ever did for Guitar Player. The first interview I ever did for Guitar Player was you and Jimmy Suman.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that was
Right. That was your first one.
that was the first one ever. Yeah, I went to Guitar
Ah.
Player and said I'd like to do an article on these two Finnish guitar players, and they said, "Well, nobody knows who they are." And I said, "That's the whole point. You know, I don't need to read Guitar Player to find out who Jimi Hendrix is. I know who Jimi Hendrix is. But if I read Guitar Player to discover players that I don't know that people should know." So I did that, and I think when we talked at that point, it was interesting to find out. I think, well, I know Jimmy used to do a lot of pop stuff in Finland, and it seemed that there were more opportunities because there were fewer players. Obviously, I mean that's it's supply and demand. I mean that's what I tell everybody in New York, Nashville, and LA. If you want to make a living playing, those are not the places to go. It's just supply and demand. So it's great that you're able to do that in Finland. Were they Indian players that lived in Finland?
No, they come here. There's an Indian guy called Schubert. His That's his first name, Schubert, because his father, he was from Mumbai, and his father was a classical violinist who played in the Western classical orchestras,
Right.
but also did music for Bollywood. And he fell in love with a Finnish woman 40, 50 years ago, and then he moved to Finland. Then he always started, bringing people. So he's brought Hari Prasad Chaurasia. He's brought, I've played with, lots of people. What was his name? Mustafa Zara, who was, he played Rudravina. No, I'm sorry, Shutravina, which is it's like a vina that you play with a slide. So I've had really good experiences with that. That's why I think, from the Krakatau days, in those days we were sort of like an anti-jazz, because we were thinking, come on, man, these 2/5s, people have played them enough. Let's do something else with this music. Maybe it doesn't have to be called jazz anymore. Maybe we can call it something else. We don't want to, of course, we love jazz, and we wouldn't want to, be called anti-jazz or anything like that, because why would we do that? We love jazz and think it's great, but it seems that it has to move a little bit forward. Otherwise, it just becomes a museum object. And then it would die, indeed. I mean, like in the 60s, there was a point when it was dying a little bit. And then suddenly you had Bitches Brew, and you had the fusion movement, which sort of brought a new level. I mean, I played to my students, they're young people. I played the Mahavishnu, and they've never heard that shit, and then they hear it, and they're going, holy Moses, what is that? And then I say, well, that's fusion, that 4-letter word, fusion.
Yeah. Well, that's what I like to say. That's when fusion was fun, back in the old days. Now in the East-West thing, I notice you're adding blues lines and blues licks to that. Do you feel a some sort of connection between Indian music and the blues?
Oh yeah, oh for sure. But I wouldn't put it maybe that explicitly. Of course, the background is so different, because when you're talking about Indian classical musicians, like when I was learned to listen to it, I always thought to myself, oh man, this is the freest music I've ever heard. It sounds so free. And then when I met the musicians, it was no, you can't do that. You can't do that. No, what are you doing now? And then in that we'd be doing a jam. And then at one point, no,
that's a morning raga. That's not an evening raga.
Yeah, the raga is different, and it's not maybe the same notes, maybe what we would call a Mixolydian scale, but the order of how it's played is very, very specific to a certain raga and a tempo. It all has to, it's all together. So I remember that a guy that I was playing with just recently, who studies with Hari Prasad Chaurasia, actually, Sahrab Vartak, great flute player, and we had a concert exactly a year ago. And at one point when we were playing, because first what usually happens is that they're starting to play, and then you have to go along with them, and I do that. But then at some point, my little red devil on the other shoulder says, "Raoul, play a jazz chord," and then I'll do that, and then he goes, "What the Shiva," or whatever, and then at some point when we were having a talk, he said, "You mean in jazz you can play whatever you like, whenever you like?" And I said, "Yeah." so so it was a little bit different. But I mean, but we, of course, I have a great respect for that. But I mean, then I learned. I mean, I've learned through the years that, well, it isn't quite as free as it sounds. It's very, very disciplined, and in fact, that's one of the things that I've learned, which is, I think, is a really good thing. Which is, of course, Coltrane, highly, highly disciplined musician, very, very disciplined in the good way, discipline, self-discipline, not meaning self-flagellation, but self-discipline in being focused. And here again, the word intention, that keeping that intention sort of glowing, and that it's always there, so you have a reason to do what you're doing.
That's interesting, because that kind of relates to something I've always thought about with music, especially when people start pushing the envelope with music, is that it needs to have an internal logic to it. It has, it can't just be anything. It can't, it's easy to be different just to be different. But unless you can pull what you're doing together, like when I think of people like Monk or Wayne Shorter, or, people who like Wayne Shorter just kind of blew off the 2/5s and started putting chords in orders people hadn't done, or Monk, plays in a rhythmic way that is very different than other people had played. But their internal logic is so strong that they pull you along with them. And I guess that's a certain kind of intention as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
I was going to ask you, well, when you talk about playing with that flute player, is that the one on YouTube where you're playing the Gibson double neck?
No, that's a Finnish player. He's like the grandfather of free jazz in Finland, because he's like he's playing flute on that video, but he's mainly known for being a tenor sax player, and he's a spirit. He just, the way he plays. I mean, he plays the flute that way too, but when he gets a tenor sax, it's like time stops. Everybody listens to him. He's 84. So he still plays concerts regularly. We've done some stuff where he plays tenor sax too, electric stuff. And it's just awesome to play with him like that. But we discovered this affinity for playing sort of a chamber music, where I'm playing more chords and a little bit more. I mean, the video that we have up, unfortunately, it's not really the best. It's not the most representative for what we do, but because we do much more sort of subtle stuff too. There, I'm trying to do the two neck thing that I'm sort of thinking Cecil Taylor. I'm thinking Cecil Taylor with using the guitar as a percussion instrument. And I think there are moments when it works very well, but it maybe it's not like all the way through so clear. But I think that's part of the risk that you take when you try to do something new. Some of it works really well, and then as you get better at it, then it sort of becomes like you're talking about it. That it gains an inner logic, which makes it sort of communicative too.
Right, exactly. That's it. Communicative is what it's all about. I mean, that's what the internal logic does. It allows you to communicate. Like, much as it's funny, much as I love Alan Holdsworth's technique and tone, and for me, I could never go into. I never got the internal logic of what he was doing. It seemed very personal to him. And he obviously knew what he was doing, but whatever it wasn't communicating to me. Yeah, and that's that's some people, so it is kind of a personal thing as well. Obviously, people respond to different things. How did the Ecstasy project come about?
Well, that really was a result of me teaching, because I'm teaching at the university here, at university level. So the people that I'm teaching, they become masters of the arts. So these are, I mean, there might be 150 people trying to get into the academy every year, and only 5 are accepted. So the people that are accepted are very highly, motivated, and they're going to do the work. So it's not like in the old days when I'd be teaching, whoever, then sometimes it would be like flogging a dead horse. Sometimes, come on, why aren't you doing? I remember once I told a student, look, you've come here for the 5 lessons, and you never do the homework, so why do you come? Why don't you do something else with your time, And then actually, a year later, I bumped into this student, and he said, thanks, Raoul, it was really good advice. And I said, so what happened? Well, I became a pharmacist, and I'm really happy. You see what I mean? Sometimes it's not, music isn't cut out for everybody. But anyway, so that was a long detour.
Right. So was the Ecstasy band made up of your students?
Well, it was that I teach a class in it's like an ensemble in improvisation. So this sounds like a little bit redundant, but I mean most classes they have a certain style. They say, okay, blue note style improvisation or bebop improvisation or fusion improvisation. Okay, that's fine. But I called it like the course that I've had it like for about 15 years. Really, it's a course which is I call it total musicianship because it has to do with listening to each other. So I have the students doing things like creating instant unison lines. So I'll tell them, okay, we're going to do an improvisation, do whatever you like, but every now and then somebody take the initiative and play a melody that the others play shadow, so that there might be a little gap between the melody, but it'll make it sound like a unison just as a way of making everybody really aware of what's going on and listening really, really, really carefully so that they're able to even catch somebody else's melody and rhythm and do it. So not free jazz doesn't mean that everybody's doing whatever they like and whatever, like you said, that has to be an inner logic to it. So what we talk about in these classes is that. And so it was one year when I had some really talented students. So like this Pauli Lutinen, the saxophone player. I mean, I could tell from the first note when he was the first day. I could tell, wow, this guy is a monster. He's young. He's already great, but he's going to be really great. And he has that right attitude. And he's not, I think in jazz you have people who have a tendency to be sort of addictive, and you can tell that, okay, this guy has a lot of talent or woman has a lot of talent, but probably going to drink themselves to death before they be able to attain anything. But I mean, this guy is very serious and does it well. And then the bass player Yori, he was also. I remember we were working on some, like I would do a thing like this. I'd come up with like a Jarrett free jazz melody. One of them is called Mandala from a record called My Song. I don't know if you know that one, but it's a really tricky little melody, and it's quite long. So I'd play it a few times and I'd say, okay, play along. Like my Indian colleagues would say, they come and say, oh, we play this little melody, and I'm okay, and I have to join them the next time. And then if I couldn't do it, they said, oh, did you not hear what I played? Which I think that's why for me the Indian model. I mean, this thing that anybody who's a virtuoso in Indian music, that first when they're young, like 5 years old, 6-year-old, they learn all the melodies and the rhythms with their voice and with their body. So they're counting their hand, and they know everything. Yeah. So by the time they get an instrument, they know the music. So it's just to transfer that music that they already know onto the instrument. Whereas in Western style, a student who wants to learn how to play has to learn how to play the instrument, the music, learn how to read music. It's like no wonder people get confused. But anyway, this is again a long detour, and so I met these young students, and it started out just that I'd say, well, why don't you come and jam? I have a really nice rehearsal room where I have I have a drum set and bass amplifiers, and I have 5 guitar amplifiers and 20 guitars, and it's everything set up there, so I can play there whenever, even midnight. It's it's in an old factory, so I invited them to come over. And then afterwards we went and had some beers, and it just sounded so great. I took an old friend of mine, Marco Onaskari, who then plays drums in the band. And it was like, I was thinking to myself that the great thing about them is that they're so motivated because they're young, and they're for them, they were at the time, they were in their late 20s. And for them, music was the most important thing in the world, which is something that it takes a little bit of a, discipline to keep that alive, because sometimes a lot of people at some point they sort of lose that enthusiasm, and then it's sort of like, well, it's just a job. But I mean, when you still have these young musicians, for them it's the life force, basically. It's the force, use the force. Right. And that's why it was so great to play with them, because it was like, wow, these guys are really serious about what they're playing, and there's no bullshitting here. These guys, when they come, like the saxophone player, I'd write the melodies. The next session, he knew them all by heart, and he could play. He knew all the changes in all the scales, whatever, So it was really nice to practice with them, because it wasn't like, what's this note here? Is this a C sharp or a C flat? Yeah. but they had the music, and then we just play it, you know.
Right. Yeah,
And that was the
it's
beginning of
always better
ecstasy.
when it's memorized. I mean, it's what was the concept behind Triad? That another group you had.
Well, that concept was that I played along. Um, I was introduced to this very young drummer, Ilmari Heikinheimo, who plays in Triad, and he was just so enthusiastic that and I felt that I got into sort of a mentoring type of role, that we'd go and have sessions and we play a lot of duos. In fact, online you might find there's some pretty nice duos that we play. Cry, for example, there's a piece called Cry, and that's from a live gig. And he had such good ears. He had studied with the drummer that I've played with before, Edward Vesala.
Oh
And
yeah.
in the beginning, he was like a real. That was his what he wanted to play. He wanted to play like Vesala, and he did. Even fact, because he had studied, and then when Vesala died in 1998 or 98, 99, um, all his instruments were lying all over the place, and then eventually he was able to buy Edward's ride cymbal, which is on all the ECM records. It's a Paiste made for Edward, and so he has that same ride cymbal. It's like, whoa. So just to make it short, this guy he had a certain attitude to playing, which was like with the ecstasy guys, that somebody that's so young, that is deadly serious. It's nothing more important than this playing. That this playing now, when we start, is the most important thing in the world. That's hard to find, because if you play with professionals, they might play better, but not all of them have that sort of like that. If I don't play this, I'll die. Not that attitude.
No, it's true. It also that varies. I noticed that varies from place to place. Like I lived in San Francisco for 12 years, and even among some of the better professionals there, I never found that feeling. And then when I moved back to New York, I realized, yeah, that's in New York. That's one thing about New York is everybody's got that in New York, because if you don't last. That's the place where there's no reason. Kind of what you were implying. There's no reason to live there unless you need to do things there. And when I came back, I think one of the first gigs I went to was Mike Stern at 55 Bar, and what's the drummer's name? Ben. Oh, now I'm spacing his last name, but he's a really well-known drummer in New York. I mean, 5 minutes into the gig, he took a solo that was like life or death. In a way that I hadn't seen, anybody play in the 12 years I lived in San Francisco. Not anybody who lived there. You just didn't get that kind of feeling out of it, and it makes a big difference. Or like when Schofield came through San Francisco and played at the Great American Music Hall, they came out and the first tune was like, the hair goes back, not because they're loud, just because of the intensity that, I hadn't heard from people playing there. And there were great players there. I mean, they were really, the funny thing is when I moved back to New York in 98, there was kind of a mass exodus from San Francisco of the young jazz players who all moved to New York. So apparently they weren't finding it there either. So a lot of your past work, you pay tribute to John Coltrane. I may even have described Krakatoa early on as, if Coltrane met Hendrix. But what made you want to do a specific record now, Solar Wind, or recently that's basically a tribute to Coltrane?
Well, actually, that came by because I was making a recording for the same record company, Long Song Records, with a record that was led by Joe Fonda, the bass player, and then Jaimo, who played with the Allman Brothers band. He was the black drummer of the original Allman Brothers band, and I was invited to the session, sort of at the last minute. This was like many years ago, and then I went there, and then I made such a good impression on the guy whose record company is Fabrizio Perisinotto, that he liked it so much that then he sent me this email that said, Raoul, that having spoken with you about Coltrane and like that, it would be really nice to make a record, a tribute record. Do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah. And and then I wanted to do it in a different way, because originally the thought was, well, maybe we should do that with Triad. But then on the other hand, I thought that, well, it'd really be nice to meet some Italian musicians And so we put together this band, and wow, I'm so happy that we did because I love them. They're fabulous musicians, and it was really a treat to meet them and play the pieces. So of course now this Corona thing sort of came and interrupted everything we were supposed to. I mean, the record was released on my birthday on the 11th of February this year, but as we know, I mean, there wasn't really time for anything to happen. We would have had a gig here in Finland 3 weeks ago, but at the last minute they said no, we can't take the risk. So that it was sort of postponed until some time in the future. So that'll happen still. But I mean, my idea was that it would be nice to play a lot of gigs in Italy, and I wouldn't need to be, they don't have to be the huge venues. I'm fine to go to Italy and play 5 or 6, club gigs, and not, as long as I don't lose money on it, I'll be fine to do that just to get the ball rolling. But then as we get really good at it, then take it to the next level. That would be really nice.
Yeah, it's a great band and it's a great record. In the making of video, you're playing some hollow body Gibson. What is that?
It's a Gibson 137, which has the shape of a 175, but it's half as thick, and it has the block under the bridge. So it's sort of like combining a Les Paul type of sustain thing to an acoustic guitar sound. In fact, that's what I was just playing through my Marshall before I came here, and I played the solo to Resolution, Coltrane solo Resolution, which I've transcribed. When you play that with a big thick Marshall tone, with a sort of Les Paul-y sustain thing, it sounds great. It's a good sound.
Well, you've always the interesting thing is you've always had that sound, and that's what I want to ask you. I've seen you play on videos or live. A Strat originally with Krakatoa, the Parker. You played a Les Paul, I think, with Triad. You played, multiple different guitars, but you always sound like you through multiple amps and different pedals. And I was wondering do you have settings that you favor that help get the sound that you hear in your head?
Whoa. Well, I'd like to make it sound like something really great, but in a way, it's just that I'm sort of addicted to a certain type of distortion sustain thing. But now recently, I've been changing the attitude. So that very guitar that I play on the record, I've been putting it through. I got myself one of these amps. Have you heard of it? It's called a Woolly Coates. Have you heard of that amp?
Oh yeah, that's Delana. Yeah,
I think it's.
Yeah, I know Delana. She lives here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a hand, point to point amp. So there's no, it'll last for my lifetime probably. Right. And it's only 15 watts. So it's like a little bit like a Princeton amp, but it has a much better tonal range. And with that amp, I've been using much more the clean settings and trying to find different ways of combining, delays and reverbs to make it sound big without sounding too ECM-ish, to pardon the expression. I mean, I don't mind the ECM thing, right, but I don't want it to. I think I find my ear irritated if the sustain is forever. I need there to be little breaks between the notes,
right,
so you can recover.
Yeah. Well, I'll be really interested to hear that because ever since I've known you and been following your music, there's a certain attack and a it's not, you don't use super amount of gain, whatever the guitar was. There's not a super amount of gain, but there's just enough. It's the hardest for me. It's the hardest sound to get. I mean, it's the hardest sound for music industry, products to get, all the modelers that they can all get heavy gain sounds. A lot of them get a really nice clean sound, but when it's that slightly broken up sound, and I think maybe one reason you like it because there's something, it's very dynamic. I mean, the harder you hit it, it sounds different when you hit it hard and soft. Is that one thing that attracts you to that sound?
Absolutely, and that so. I mean, I counted my pedals one day, and I had like about 45, ridiculous, and like of which 20 are different sorts of distortion, and probably about 5 or 6 different fuzz pedals. But I mean, the fuzz pedals I haven't used very much recently, and in fact, it was just yesterday I was thinking about it to myself that that perhaps, say, I've been trying to, I don't know, legitimize myself to be able to play pieces where there are chords and voicings, a little bit jazzy. So, because I think that from in jazz circles a little bit, well, he plays a little, he's sort of like a rock guitar who wants to try to, want to be jazz player, and rock players, they think, well, he's a jazz player who want to be rock player. So what it hasn't been so much, more for my own mental health. It's sort of nice to sometimes take a fairly clean tone. I can even demonstrate here. I'll show you. This is what I've been doing while we speak. This is my black Les Paul. I've just installed. This is sort of an interesting detail. If you look above the bridge, you can't really see it, but there's a piece. There's a half. You could see it like that if I light it like that. There's a half of a violin fingerboard that's attached there to give my hand a place to rest. So that makes it much easier. I've been really working on technique now because I'm writing a book of guitar technique.
Okay. Yeah, you have that hand rest on your Parker as well, that wooden hand rest.
So it's something that I find that's useful, so I don't have to keep my arm up, and I'm really working hard on keeping my shoulder like that. So now today I was working something like this, which is the rotations of 3-note sets. So I was going. And then the same idea put into voicings give you sounds like for example like and then like let me see, this would be good. The same 3 notes. So you can do so many different things by using that concept. That's what I've been working on a lot, and I'm thinking of putting it in my book. So my book won't be so much of a guide to playing 2/5s, but it'll be, or even a simple modal thing, but it'll be a way of sort of hopefully bypassing that, and then in effect teaching through the book to play modes better, not just as a fingering pattern, but actually be aware of what's inside the mode. And that's what I've been working on. So I like this type of voicings,
So are you moving through the mode, maintaining the same intervals, or?
No, I'm playing pretty chromatically here. So here, if you could, I don't know if you can hear it so well through the Skype, but. And then I can play voicings like. So I'm really working on using open strings to give me more added like. So I can play notes that would be impossible to play otherwise.
Right, you get closer voicings like that, more like piano type voicings,
like cluster type voicings. And of course, Bill Frisell has done that beautifully. As a matter of fact, we had the same teacher at Berkeley. We had John Damian. And I've read many articles with Frisell where he's always complimenting that John Damian was such a great teacher, and he was. I had him for 2 years when I was at Berkeley, and it was exactly that type of thing. The thing where you're going like. Whatever. No, but so there's something about the clean tone which makes it possible to play that type of a music, and it's also that's one of the things about the new triad. The first triad record that we did was highly. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
First triad album. That's highly abrasive because it was a little bit that feeling that like I tell my friends that, why did you put out a record like that? And I said, well, because Trump won the election. You have to that he is the Antichrist. And so the music that you play when there's an Antichrist leading the world politics, it can't be sort of like nice Perry Como comfort music. It has to be something that's sort of a little bit more suggestive of somehow some sort of fighting against it, something like that. So I felt that the music in that record is like more a certain period that was very. I don't know. Do you remember the last piece, which is it's like Somewhere Over the Rainbow?
No,
Do you remember that?
if I listened to it, it was a while back, so I don't.
Because the last piece it begins as a totally manically deconstructed version of the melody played in harmonics with a high distortion, like ridiculous distortion, but in harmonics all the way through, and using a whammy bar and then all sorts of, and using a Fernandez sustainer guitar so that the notes last as long as you want without having to feed it back. But it sounds like feedback, and then it eventually from this ugly mess of sound and fast thing, it sort of gradually calms down at the end. There's the last sort of like a sigh of the beautiful melody, the last melody, which is and that ends the record. And for me, it's my hope that after all this mess, it's something that I saw when he was elected. It was like, this is not gonna end well. And as we see,
no. I think nobody thought it was going to end well.
Nobody thought so. So, but then on the other hand, when I'm at home, what do I listen to mainly? I listen mainly to piano music. Hardly ever guitar music. Well, okay, yesterday I was listening to the guitar music of Toru Takemitsu, classical guitar. Have you heard that stuff?
No.
Toru Takemitsu? Toru Takemitsu, a very famous, the Japanese composer. He actually was a guitar player himself, and he writes beautifully for the guitar.
Was he the film composer?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have heard that stuff. Yeah. That's amazing.
That
is amazing stuff.
It's some of the most challenging music. I mean, I play classical guitar too, which I would never, release a record of me playing that because I'm not good enough for that. But for my own pleasure, I play all summer. I've been playing classical guitar. It's been really nice, and his music is so challenging because he's thinking guitar as a composer and not as a set of fingerings. He's using the fingerings, yeah, but he's sort of putting them in a very musical organization. So it's very polyphonic, and there will be some voices that you have to use an open string while you're changing position, and it has to sound fluid. So you know da dee da. That middle note is an open string, and it can't sound like ding whoa ding.
Right.
It has to sound like it's like flowing. So I would say that actually I've learned so much about guitar and what I want to do with it through playing classical guitar, like Barrios, the Paraguayan composer, amazing. Giuliani, not
the mayor of New York,
no,
former
the good Maurizio Giuliani, a great composer from the period of Beethoven, and so I think they all have so many things to. Have you ever played the piece of the Leo Brouwer?
Yeah,
Do you know him?
I don't play classical guitar, but when I did start messing around with a little bit, he's one of the first I got a portfolio of his music because I loved his music, and it seemed, some of it seemed simple enough to be able to play and and hear, but it was so interesting and so beautiful and so different. I mean, other than Bach, the other thing is I just got a book of Bach for idiots, basically, and because there's certain composers that sound good even if you don't play them at tempo. If you play them slow, it doesn't matter how slow you play a Bach piece, it sounds like music. And it didn't matter how slow I played the Leo Brouwer piece, it sounded like music. Unlike Charlie Parker, whereas if you can't play that stuff at tempo, it doesn't sound like music. So it's real. I always found that really hard to get my head around. But yeah, Brouwer's stuff is terrific. What I noticed just now, you playing clean, you still sound like you. It's still, there's something about, and we all know this, every guitar player has an attack and a way they hit the strings with their right hand and with their left hand, and whatever little bit of vibrato they put on or don't put on. All of that stuff, it's what makes the guitar such a fabulous instrument, is that it responds to all those little nuances. And just listening to you play clean now, I realized, yeah, it's all there. I mean, it has to do with how you're picking it with your right hand and what you're doing with your left hand as you play the note. It's like Bill Frisell. Everybody thinks, oh, what effects is he using? No, it doesn't matter. He plays acoustic guitar. He sounds exactly like Bill Frisell.
He does. And talking about Monk,
Yeah.
I have an album with Paul Motion and Joe Lovano where he's doing Monk. It's called Monk in Motion, and he knows how to play Monk so well. I saw him many times. I used to go in August when I would be in New York, and he'd have that 1 week at the Village Vanguard. I'd go and check him out with this band, and I was always flabbergasted. This trio doesn't need a bass player.
No.
It sounds so full.
No.
And it's like fine.
It may have been the greatest group of musicians ever assembled, and not just that, but the fact that they played together for 20 years. So, seeing them anytime after the first 10 was like, there's a great Bill story. I saw them in San Francisco, and Paul called some tune, and Bill is there with his music, and he's looking for the music, and finally he says, I can't find it. Okay, we haven't played this in 5 years, but I'll just try and do it. And of course he nailed it, whatever it was. But that was an amazing band. But I mean, I feel the same way about your sound. I've listened to you through so many different records, and it always sounds like you. But
that's nice, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's as we always say, for better or for worse, I always sound like me. That's the that's the question. But I understand what you're saying about going for a little cleaner sound if you want to play those kind of clusters and things like that, for them to all ring out and he'd be able to hear them and not just turn into kind of this mush of overtones. That makes sense. One distinctive I wanted to ask you about a couple of guitars I saw online. There's a black single cut semi-hollow body that you're playing with Joe Fonda and Gerald Cleaver that I didn't recognize.
It's a Washburn, Washington.
Okay.
It's actually Washington. Just what I want to play. But that's my New York guitar. I have a really nice that same gig I'm playing a Strat, and then this guitar. So those are my guitars that I have in New York, and I even have a bass there. So I have 3 guitars always in New York. So when I go there, I don't have to travel, because I can't stand the stress of traveling with the guitar. I mean, I've seen the conveyor belt coming out of the plane, and then the baggage cart drives away, and my guitar comes alone and goes bonk, like the ground. So
no, you don't want to be doing that.
That guitar isn't really such a great guitar, unfortunately, but it does what it's supposed to do. And I've been looking. I'll show you what I have. I keep my eyes open for a good. This is another guitar, which is an Epiphone.
Oh yeah, sure.
But it's a plywood Epiphone, and it's sort of nice, but it sounds plywoody. It doesn't have that. I had a beautiful Swedish guitar called a Levin, which was made in 1947. It was beautiful. It cost like what, $3,000, and I sold a couple of guitars, and I really put myself into it. I thought that was going to be the guitar that was going to really do what I wanted to do with an acoustic sound. It did. The sound was beautiful, but the fingerboard was flat. There was no radius to it.
Oh wow!
And I noticed that when I was playing Barre things, my fingers just didn't like it. Because I don't know if you can see it. Unfortunately, my fingers are starting to lose cartilage between the joints. So So sometimes if I'm playing the wrong type of a guitar, it can actually hurt. But luckily, my doctor tells me that, well, the best thing to do is just to play as much as you can. Thank God. So it's not some doctor saying that, no, you shouldn't play anymore. That would be
good. Well, plywood, a 175 is plywood. I mean, it's just a different sound. That's what, a lot of jazz players play that. But what is that guitar in the Tatu Ronco? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Oh, that's the Tatu Ronco.
Tatu
Ronco. Ronco. Yeah. And that guitar is the Fernandez Sustainer.
Okay.
Because I have what I think it's called an Axe guitar synthesizer, microphone under the bridge, and that goes to a guitar synth that goes to two separate. So it's a stereo effect, and then I have the guitar amplifier, using the regular sounds, and then I can switch back and forth between them, and then I have volume pedals, so I can sort of morph from one sound into the other. So I can be going from a clean vibraphone sound, and then suddenly come with massive distortion, the same notes, they just sort of ooze in, and that's sort of the fun. You can find that on SoundCloud. If you go to SoundCloud and put my name there, you'll find some of the early triad material. And there's one, what's it called? Moon something. I can't think of the moon juice or something, some crazy stupid name. And there I'm using that effect. So it's a guitar synthesizer with another guitar. I mean, regular guitar sound. And there's something about that I like, and that's something we did a lot with Tatu. So in fact, if you want to hear the best usage of that, go to my website, and there where it says bands, there's two submenus. One is active, and you click on that, and then you'll find the menu of all the bands. And the band that we have with Tatu is called Pronto Pronto, like answering the phone in Italy. Okay. And then you click on that, it opens a page. At the bottom, there's a sound file that you click on, and then that's a good piece. If you haven't heard that, that's
I'll have to try. I have a lot of stuff to check out. Getting back to your playing style for a second, you one thing I picked up on really early is you like to hammer on an open string up the neck, and you'll go back and forth, which sounds to me like a certain kind of saxophone sound. Is that what you were going for with that? Yeah,
you bet.
It's a great sound. It's like Coltrane or Pharoah Sanders. It's those.
I mean, they're talking about Eddie right now. That if you transpose those same ideas, you have like this type of thing. You have like. So you're actually getting that sort of a saxophone-y type of flow, but it still sounds like a guitar. So it's not like, trying to cheat so much. And even with a clean sound, you can get that. But I don't know if you ever heard this. This is from my orchestral piece. I came up with a pretty. Let me see if I can do this so you can see. Because this is something that I think that is sort of one of my own techniques developed out of Van Halen. It's a piece like with a mystical Japanese mood. It goes like this. Oh, sorry. Is it? So I'm bending from down here.
Right.
I'm tapping a note. Then unfortunately effect of that, if I do that in live, then most people are going to think, and that's fusion.
Oh no, that is so Japanese. It is so Japanese. It sounds like that composer we were just discussing, and I am so stealing that technique. But aside from that, listening to play it, what I really notice is one thing that makes it sound Japanese is the space between what you're playing. It's a unique sense of space between the notes that instantly, to me, sounds Japanese.
Like I use that as a something when I explain the importance of silence between notes and between phrases in for example a solo. They're important. I use the analogy of archery. That it's the moment that you put the arrow to the bow and you stretch the bow. That's the silence. Nothing's happening when you're doing that. And then you release it, and then the energy happens. So it's a little bit the same thing. So or a diving board. That moment when you go out to the diving board and you take a little leap, and then you go down. The diving board goes down, and suddenly there's inertia. Nothing's happening. You're not moving at all, and then suddenly, whoosh, and then it whips you off into space, and that's sort of like then your phrase comes back into life, and then it has a little bit more importance. So I mean, I suppose that's why sometimes if I listen to some of my own recordings, then I'm just shredding and shredding, and then take a break, then it's like, well, nah, it just it winds up just by being a lot of words without sentences.
Yeah, as they say, space, the final frontier. Uh,
Did you grow up with that stuff too?
what, Star Trek? Oh, of course, of course. Um,
I was
yeah.
I was living in California that when that was on in 67, 68, and I remember that we'd be religious about seeing. We couldn't do anything else when it was Star Trek. We had to see that, live.
Oh, of course. I mean, I don't even know. I'm not sure if I saw it. It depending on when it was on, whether I saw it initially or whether I saw it in reruns later. Um, your chording on Solar Winds recalls. Are it sounds like you're doing stacked fourths and fifths, kind of like McCoy Tyner. Is that deliberate to evoke that?
Well, it also is playing with a violinist like Emanuele Parini. Um, he's playing it so freely around that's the type of voicing that allows freedom to the soloist. That's why McCoy played it so much, because it doesn't. I mean, immediately a seventh chord or a triad immediately anchors the ear so much in a tonal world that if somebody's playing something that's not in that same tonality, or an outside note, it'll sort of stick out like a, I don't know, like a sore thumb or something, whatever,
Right.
that's the expression. That it wouldn't, then it would make the soloist sound wrong. And so in fact, I was just today, I was looking at a video somebody had posted on Facebook about Chick Corea describing how he accompanies. And he was just he's always so sweet. And I really love Chick Corea. And he was just sitting there at the piano and he was saying, well, when I'm listening to somebody play, I just try to find what they really like. And then when I can hear that he's liking what I'm doing, then I continue. Then I've found what he likes doing, or she, then that's what I want to do. And I think that's a really good definition of accompanying, that you're trying to make whoever is playing a solo or the melody, you're trying to make them sound great. That by accompanying them carefully, you can do it. Now, I'm not saying that I succeeded to my own ear so well on the record always, but I think that there's some good moments there, especially with this sort of like a climactic type of energy, where you have fourth chords that are growing and growing in intensity, and then they sort of explode thanks to Tiziano Tononi, who sort of like knows how to hear that type of stuff.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. The concept of accompaniment. They were talking about that on a podcast, and they were saying something similar, that you have to find that, to what Chick Corea was saying, that you have to find what the person likes. And I'll never forget Jim Hall being interviewed and saying that when he accompanied Sonny Rollins did not want him feeding him chords. He wanted him to play chords responding to what he was playing. Whereas when he was playing with Art Farmer wanted him to feed him, harmonies to play over. And so it never occurred to me that there's two different ways to do it, and different soloists would request different things. Speaking of violin, was that a nod to Mahavishnu having a violin on this project, or because at times it does recall that?
Well, I mean,
I guess it
I
can't
suppose
not. Yeah.
that we guitar players that are knowledgeable about these type of things will always hear that wonderful echo of Jerry Goodman and John McLaughlin. I mean, just what a great sound. And I mean, you can go further back and go to Django and Stéphane Grappelli,
Yeah.
and what a great combination violin and guitar is. It's just like made in heaven. It's perfect. And the ranges are they're that different, so that the violin is above the guitar range, just in the right area. So chords, they really sound well with a violin. But I mean, one of the reasons was also that wouldn't have made sense to have a saxophone player. Originally, the thought was that I was going to take the Juhani Aaltonen, who I was telling you about,
Right.
that would come and play tenor. But then it would have sort of just been, well, there's so many saxophone tribute like records to Coltrane, that the idea was here that we're not even going to really try to emulate it. So, dot to dot, we're going to try to sort of more bring the spirit of the music, and as opposed to the way it sounds. That, okay, we're going to try to get into the spirit of it and present it, because obviously we can't play like Coltrane,
Right.
but
Who can?
we can admire the spiritual message there, and then emulate that. And that I think with Emanuele it was great. He doesn't speak so good English, and I speak a little bit of Italian, so we had a great communication. We were somehow just musically communicating, and it was fun.
It is a great combination. Well, the later Abercrombie sessions with Mark oh, Feldman, I want to say, John
All right.
Abercrombie records, Mark Feldman. That's always a beautiful combination. I hear some 12 string on the record. Was that there's no 12 string?
No, I wasn't able to afford bringing a 12 string to the gig. But which piece are you thinking about? Can you tell
I
me?
should have written it down. I didn't write it down, so I can't remember. But I could have sworn because I was wondering if it was the Burns that I think you used to have, or the Gibson double neck. But maybe it's something else. Maybe it's just the way the violin and the guitar were working together, or something. But specifically, Saturn reminds me of Sonny Chirac a little bit, and I don't know if he was ever an influence or.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Oh yeah. No, I remember that when I was playing in the band of Edward Vesala, he was always telling me, that hey, I don't want you to play like Metheny. Stop playing like Metheny. Stop trying to be John Scofield. Fuck that. I want something different. They play much better than you, so don't do it. And I was like, oh shit. And then he gave me all sorts of records to listen to. I mean, I think through him I discovered Paul Bley, the trio records, the early trio records, like Closer, and like I love him. Like, but then also it was like Black Woman, and then there was a record called Peekaboo or something, Pokabee or something like that,
Yeah.
some funny word thing, which was with Linda Chirac. And listening to that record was, have you heard those records? It's like she's screaming at the top of her voice, like she's being tortured with rats or something. So like it's really an intense sound. And at the time, I didn't understand that. I couldn't think of why would you want to subject anybody to this type of noise. But then with a little bit of more experience and learning to hear it in a different way, I can hear it that it's aiming for that sort of like Ehlerish intensity, which is something that that's a very hard thing to have students listen to, because when I play it for my students, I'll play some Albert Eiler. They'd think I'm crazy. What are you playing that stuff for me for? And I'd say, look, that Albert Eiler, this is not taught in the academy. This is these are among the musicians that are never mentioned in the academy. I can think of so many. Sam Rivers, never mentioned in the academy.
Yeah.
The Art Ensemble of Chicago, never mentioned in the academy. Albert Eiler, well, sort of that as a footnote, maybe, that he existed. And then if you're talking about late Coltrane in academic circles, usually it'll be, well, Coltrane was playing well until '64, but then it probably started taking LSD, and then he lost control, and then he was indulging in something that wasn't so nice to listen to anymore. But then, depending on how you hear it, then you either love it or you don't. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, in academia, that's what I find with the students that I have, that they haven't been exposed to these type of artists, or like a band called, I don't know, Air, with Henry Threadgill and
Yeah.
Fred Hoffman and Steve McCall. I mean, that's why it's a little bit, in a way, I'm not really, I don't keep myself so informed about all the guitar players that are in the world, because I mean, when there are, I mean, of course, I'll listen to Joe Bonamassa, and I'll be aware of Satriani. I've seen him live, and of course, and Steve Vai, of course. I want to hear what they're doing and see what they're doing, and then steal whatever I think is useful, like
Yeah.
like the whammy bar madness and stuff like that. And Satriani has a lot of things that I like, and a lot of guitar players. But still, when I listen to, here again, we're talking about the surface of the music and the depth underneath the surface. So when I'm listening to some, like Jarrett trio music, even some of the stuff with the standards, he just takes it to such a depth that even though he's been playing these pieces that I would otherwise be bored to death, like Stella by Starlight or something, and then I'll listen to him play it. It's like, oh, I didn't know that it was that deep. There were these depths
Oh,
that had.
they're definitely deep. I mean, Jim Hall played the same standards for most of his life. I mean, I tell people I once did I think a wedding gig or something out in San Francisco, and we were playing Satin Doll, and the piano player said, "Oh, if I never have to play this again as long as I live." And I'm thinking, Duke Ellington played it probably every night of his life, and you hear the standards records by Paul Motian, that whole Broadway series.
Oh,
Or, when I heard Robin Ford playing Proud Mary behind Etta James on this old Dave Sanborn show. He had a night music show. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And, Robin's playing these voicings on it that I had never heard anybody play. And it's like, nobody ever wants to play Proud Mary again as long as they live. But if you're talented, you can find stuff to play on it. And I mean, it's encouraging. I'm finding a lot of young guitar players, many of whom I featured on this site, who are getting into people like Sonny Chirac. I don't know if you've heard Bushman's Revenge. I think they're Scandinavian.
I've heard. Wait a minute. No, the name is familiar, but I haven't heard them. I have to check it out.
Yeah, he's great, and they do a Sonny Chirac cover, I think, and this American guitar player Anthony Pirogue, who plays with the Aesthetics now, got a couple of guys from Fugazi, but Anthony's just, one of these spectacular guitar players who can play everything from Danny Gatton-like country to Sonny Chirac, stuff. And I think they did a Sonny Chirac cover on one of their records. If you want, I would say if you want to get your students into Sonny Chirac, the place to start would be Ask the Ages with Elvin.
That's the one. That's the one.
That's about as accessible as I would say Sonny's playing has been. Or there's that Calypso record, or what is it? There's one record he did that's either Calypso or reggae or some sort of thing on it. I have it somewhere, but it's another interesting context for him. Or the weirdest thing is him on the Herbie Mann record, the Memphis Underground record, where it's he's playing with Herbie Mann, which it was truly bizarre. One thing I may have asked you this in the past, I don't remember in what context, but you use upright bass in most of your bands as opposed to electric bass, even though you're playing distorted guitar music. So what is it you like about using an acoustic upright as opposed to an electric bass?
Yeah, that's just a personal preference. It's just that there's somehow here I have to put it into context. Last night I played my first gig in many years as an electric bass player with a Senegalese drummer, and we were accompanying 5 young rappers, and with a bank of synthesizers, and I was playing bass, and so basically me and the Senegalese drummer we were doing the beats and playing the lines, and I was playing sort of like dubbish lines with a very very sort of dark and full low tone, and playing with my fingers. So in fact today my fingers. I had practiced enough before, so they're not like bloody today. But I love the sound of electric bass, and it's just that I still haven't found a real. With Scorch Trio, with Ingebrigt, he plays electric bass there, but he plays it so much like a noise source too, because he's using all these crazy electro-harmonic pedals and whatever, or Death by Audio pedals, those.
Right. Yeah, those are. Serious.
They make the guitar and the amp sound broken, but that's another aesthetic, the noise aesthetic, and there's something I just like the resonance. In fact, since you haven't heard what I just did with Triad, I'd be glad to send you. We did a show for the radio, so I could send it to you. We transfer. There's
sure.
The MP3
yeah, that'd be great. I'd love
if you
to
want
hear.
to listen to it, you can hear it, because that's more the acoustic type of stuff that we've been doing. And here again, aiming more towards when people would ask me about that session, I'd say, well, a little aiming for the aesthetics of a piano trio, where the idea would be that it's something that's not so harsh and abrasive to listen to, that you can listen to it without having to put on a seatbelt. That's it's nice to listen to, and it's pleasant. The sound it blends well with an acoustic bass, and the drums are playing very softly, but still with a lot of rhythm and attitude and all that. So I'll send that to you later to your email address, and you just download it. You can check it out.
It's interesting because I've always found your sound really accessible and pleasant, even under the most, the most intense circumstances. There's something that's another thing about your sound is I don't find it. I've never found it abrasive. It's always there's a roundness to it, and even though it can be aggressive, there's a great roundness to it that I always dug. So when this hopefully is over and you can get out and play live and tour again, what project would you want to be taking out?
Well, actually, one project that I would really like to take out on the road especially in these times, it's a band which is it's a nonette. So there are two saxophone players, one of which is the Pauli, who's in Ecstasy, and then triad basically. So triad with two saxophone players, and then four Senegalese drummers. So they're playing traditional drums. The three of them are playing sabar drums, which is played with a green twig that has to be green, otherwise it breaks, and you snap it. And then the other hand with the hand, it's sort of like a conga. And then one of the drummers playing tama, which is the talking drum. And he's an amazing drummer, Yamar Tiam. He's a seventh generation drummer, so he's learned from his forefathers. And they, the talking drum actually is a talking drum. He'd say, "Raoul, listen to this, bling, 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 bling." And I'd say, "Well," and he said, "What did I say?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, this is what we said. I'm sending to the next village that we need a doctor. We have a person bitten by a snake." And then "Oh, can you play it again?" "Okay." Oh, okay, now I got it. So when I hear that, I know that's what it is. But he also, he's an incredible showman. So the idea is we're playing. I don't know. Have you ever heard Krakatau's first record? Ritual. Do you know that record?
Yeah. I think I have it on vinyl.
Okay, if you have it on vinyl, the power to you. The first piece on that record is something that we play together. So that's something that goes very well, with a sort of like a heavy Senegalese type of drive. And we have a whole program. In fact, you can even find it on Spotify. You can find what we've done before if you're curious. It's Krakatau and Senegalese drums.
Okay.
Or Senegal drums, and that's what you put in the search box, and
right.
You'll find. And that would be a really nice project to do. In fact, we were just going to do a gig that was going to be filmed and recorded just before the corona outbreak came, and then our concert was of course canceled. So we never got to that point, and that would have been something nice to do, because that's something that would be. It is just such a joie de vivre. This sound of this really joyous rhythm. There's nothing dark and I don't know. It's all bright. It's very, very sunny music, and very hopeful music, and very uplifting music. So it would seem to me that would be like something that I'd like to do, and that would be something that could be offered to festivals. And since it's such a big band, it's a little bit more different than other bands. As far as I know, there aren't any bands where there's a drum set and four drummers.
All right.
So that would be something interesting to do. But I mean, the logistics are so difficult. So the other band, of course, is Ecstasy. We have a few gigs coming up in November, and then Triad, because that's easy to move around. That's just a trio, so we can go and play wherever. So these would be the bands that I hope we can get on the road eventually.
Well, how's Finland doing with the whole lockdown COVID thing?
Well, we locked down early enough, so at the moment the death toll is 340. So and the population is what, a little bit lower than 5 million altogether. So we've managed pretty well, but now there's a second wave coming because people are back in school and people are going to restaurants and stuff. So now there's a second wave coming. So it's probably, I mean, I played a gig yesterday. I have a gig with the Rappers on Saturday, and then the beginning of November I have the gigs with Ecstasy, and then the beginning of December I have a duo gig with Paul Nelson Love from the Scorch Trio, which I'm really looking forward to. But the danger is that things are going to be closed down again. That they say that, well, you can only meet in groups of 5 people, in which case, you can't have any clubs or, gigs like that unless you stream them.
Right. So the clubs are open in Finland now for the moment?
For the moment, they're open,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's going to be for many more weeks.
Right. Yeah.
The way the news is developing, So,
well, stay safe yourself. Take care of yourself. And thank you so much for doing this. This has been so great. I'll try and get it up as soon as possible.
Well, it was really nice to talk to you. I was so self-indulgent to talk about myself all the time, and we didn't really get a chance to talk about you here yet. So we'll have to do that next time.
Next time. That's what this is all about. It's all about you and your music, and I'm happy to spread the word.